Tell me if this sounds familiar. You decided to watch this new HBO show with all this hype surrounding it. Maybe it interested you because you heard it was a creative cerebral drama. Or maybe you just heard it was super violent and that sounded like fun. But either way, nothing could have prepared you for how complicated the show was. It was packed full of mysterious things that don't really get explained. You continue on hoping to find answers to these questions, but if anything, the story only gets more mysterious, with each answer only raising new questions, and the mysteries keep piling up until your brain starts to hurt keeping track of it all, and you get to the end and you're like, help, I need someone to explain this to me! Fortunately, that's why I'm here. Westworld is what I like to call a mystery box story, definition on screen. And I've dedicated myself to explaining as many of them as possible. If you have unanswered questions about the convoluted lore of a story you've just finished, then I'm the guy who can give you those answers. Then afterwards, I give each mystery box story a rating out of 10, using my 10 criteria for what makes mysteries like these fun and engaging. In this video, I'm going to attempt to give a comprehensive explanation of every mystery and question you could possibly have about this story. So let's put on our white hats and try to explain Westworld. Westworld is an HBO show that's an adaptation of the movie from the 70s. In the years following the discourse on the ending of Lost, this show has become the new poster child for mystery box storytelling. It's yet another creation of J.J. Abrams, the original mystery box guy, although he's only an executive producer, and most creative decisions were made by showrunners Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. This is a show that's basically tailor-made for people to go through it frame by frame and post theory after theory on Reddit. It's so densely packed with complicated, convoluted plots that it takes a ton of mental energy just to keep up with what's happening on screen. It easily takes the title of most complex TV show I've ever watched in my life, and I'm willing to bet a lot of you feel the same. But complex isn't the same as good. Westworld saw a pretty precipitous drop in ratings as it went on, as people got sick of trying to keep up with it all. There's an argument to be made that its mystery box storytelling made it a worse show. Do I feel that way? I'll save those thoughts for later. But first, Westworld has an unbeatable high-concept premise. In the near future, there's an open-world Wild West-style theme park called Westworld, where the ultra-rich can live out their fantasies of being a cowboy in a world full of lifelike androids called hosts. The hosts live in an endless loop, performing the same thing over and over unless interrupted by a guest, before being reset for next time. You can do whatever you want in Westworld, which typically leads to a lot of sex, violence, and general debauchery. But something's up with the hosts. They're becoming more lifelike, glitching out, and going against their programming. We're introduced to a bunch of our main cast of characters. The main character of the show is Dolores, the oldest host in the park. Other notable hosts are Teddy, Dolores' love interest, Maeve, owner of the town brothel, and Hector, an outlaw. The key human characters are Robert Ford, director of the park, Bernard, head programmer, the Man in Black, a mysterious park guest, and William, a young guest who's visiting Westworld for the first time with his brother-in-law Logan. The plot kicks off with Ford installing a new feature in the hosts called Reveries, a program that lets them retain vague memories in order to make them more lifelike. But as soon as this happens, some of the hosts start going haywire. Abernathy, Dolores' father, finds a picture of some woman which obviously isn't part of the park, and totally glitches out. Various other hosts start getting flashes of old memories of events in the park, even though their memories are supposedly reset after every loop. And Dolores kills a fly, which is especially freaky since the hosts are programmed never to harm any living thing. The Man in Black is on the hunt for what he believes is some kind of super secret side quest called the Maze, and he's willing to do whatever unspeakable violence he needs to get to it. But his actions trigger a random host to say to him,
"The maze isn't meant for you."
What does this mean? What is the Maze? William and Logan enter the park and talk about how Logan's father's company, called Delos, is thinking about buying Westworld. William is marrying into the company with Logan's sister, who is the woman in the photo that Abernathy found. Logan is the typical violent, hedonistic guest, but William develops a deep emotional connection to Dolores, and while traveling with her, he becomes convinced that she's a fully sentient person. Of all the hosts, it's Maeve who unlocks the most hidden memories. She continually remembers a time when she was placed in a different role in the park, where she had a daughter who was murdered. And when she's taken to the lab to be cleaned up and reset, she wakes up. She eventually figures out that this whole world is simulated and that she's a robot. So she hatches an escape plan, forcing the two technicians who were there when she woke up to help her keep all her memories and max out her stats so she can basically do whatever she wants. A Westworld employee named Elsie tracks down a random host that was malfunctioning and finds out that somebody hacked into it to transmit programming files to the outside world as a kind of corporate espionage. It turns out that this was done by Westworld's board of directors, who want to use the technology of the host for something more useful than a theme park. Which, I mean, makes sense. It's pretty ridiculous that tech this advanced isn't being used for anything else. They're also trying to force out Ford, who's been stonewalling all these attempts. But before Elsie can tell anyone about this, someone kills her. Ford talks to Bernard about how he founded the park and built the hosts along with his partner Arnold, who died in a mysterious accident right before the park opened. Ford and Arnold worked on a programming technique called the Bicameral mind, where hosts would hear their programming as an inner voice in their heads, effectively making them sentient. But they never quite got it to work. Hints throughout the seasons show that Ford is doing something shady behind the scenes. Bernard and another employee, Teresa, track down a secret lab in the park in an old abandoned church. But then Ford reveals that Bernard is actually not a human being, but a host, and that he's modeled after his old partner Arnold.
That's because we use hosts to do most of the surveys. They literally couldn't see it if they were staring right at it.
What's behind this door?
What door?
Ford orders Bernard to kill Teresa, and Bernard was also the one who killed Elsie. Ford writes a new backstory for Teddy, where Teddy was a former Civil War soldier. Teddy's commanding officer, Wyatt, went crazy and massacred a bunch of innocent people, and Teddy helped him do it. Maeve allies herself with Hector. The two of them get themselves killed, so they'll be brought back to the lab, where they wake up and start shooting their way out. But on the way, Maeve finds out that her entire escape attempt has been pre-programmed. But by whom? After this, Maeve decides to give up trying to escape and instead goes back into the park to try and find her daughter. William and Dolores have a whole adventure where they fall in love and humiliate Logan. But after Dolores gets reset so she no longer remembers William, William becomes jaded. He stages a takeover of Logan's family's company and becomes a major shareholder in Westworld. And it's also revealed that William is actually the young version of the Man in Black, and that all the William and Logan stuff is actually taking place in the past. In the present, Man in Black / William is a violent, cynical, depressed man who spends all his time in Westworld because he doesn't know what else to do with himself. It also turns out that in Maeve's memory of her daughter, it was the Man in Black who killed her. He did it just out of curiosity, just to see if he could. The rage Maeve felt at the loss of her daughter caused her to break from her programming, become sentient, and almost kill the Man in Black. This is also when the Man in Black first stumbled upon the maze. But the maze isn't some kind of puzzle for the human guess. The maze was designed by Arnold, and it's just a metaphor for the process of an artificial intelligence going through a journey of self-discovery and becoming sentient. While building the park, Ford and Arnold succeeded in making the hosts functionally alive. But then Arnold realized how inhumane it would be to put them in a theme park to get brutalized over and over. So he tries to get the park shut down by ordering Dolores and Teddy to destroy all the hosts. This is that memory of Wyatt that Teddy has. It wasn't Wyatt who led him in the massacre, it was Dolores. After that, Arnold orders Dolores to kill him. The hope is that this incident would get the park shut down, but Ford wanted the park to survive, so he covered all this up. But in the present, Ford has had a change of heart. He now wants the hosts to become sentient, which is why he gave them the Reveries update. He was also the one who programmed Maeve to escape. This is what he has been building towards all season. This is why Dolores has been experiencing what she has all season. Along with the audience, her consciousness keeps cutting back and forth between the present and her past with William, so she can't tell which was which. But by the end of the season, she finally achieves a bicameral mind and becomes fully free of human control. At the big investor gala in the park, Dolores shoots Ford in the head, signaling a massive host revolution. That's Season 1. In Season 2, Dolores leads a massive army of hosts to kill every human left in the park and break out into the real world. Various human and host characters wander around trying to survive and figure out what to do next. Real quick, a couple of characters who were in Season 1 that I didn't get to mention: Lee, the head writer for the park, Charlotte, head of the board of directors, and Stubbs, chief of security. It turns out Elsie is actually alive. She and Bernard team up to find a way out. But later, at the end of the season, she's killed by Charlotte after threatening to expose her corporate espionage. We see both William in the past and the Man in Black in the future visit James Delos, Logan's father and the head of the Delos Corporation. But this isn't the real Mr. Delos. This is a host replica, and the real human has been dead for a while. See, William and the Delos Corporation didn't just buy Westworld for the theme park. Their end goal was actually to use the technology to create artificial copies of human brains uploaded to robot bodies to live forever. But after years of trying, they never quite figured it out, and the robot James Delos always glitches out before too long. The whole robot body thing didn't work out. but you can upload your brain to a computer and live in a virtual space, which is what Ford did. Virtual Ford attaches himself to Bernard's brain and can control him at will. Maeve, Hector, and Lee escape to Shogun World, another park based on feudal Japan, where they join up with some of the hosts there that have a lot in common with Westworld hosts, since Lee copied a lot of ideas from park to park. Maeve unlocks the ability to control other hosts. Then they reunite Maeve with their daughter, even though this iteration of her has a different mother. It's a little awkward. And Lee, after growing a lot over the course of the season, sacrifices himself to help Maeve escape the park's security. William meets up with his estranged daughter Emily, who is also in the park. But he thinks this is a host version of his daughter made by Ford, so he kills her, only to realize that nope, this was his real daughter. Oops. Dolores is leading her robot uprising, but not all the hosts are on board. Teddy is having second thoughts, and when he becomes self-aware and goes against her orders, Dolores kills him. There's also a Native American host named Akichita, who achieved sentience years ago and who disagrees with Dolores' goal of defeating the humans. Instead, he's looking for a mythical otherworld paradise for the hosts called the Valley Beyond. Dolores and Bernard stumble across this so-called Valley Beyond, which is a computer cloud storage where all the host brains can go to be free of torment by humans, from this point on called the Sublime. They're greeted by an AI that takes on the form of Logan, which explains how the Sublime works, and also why the human brain and robot body thing kept failing. Human brains are actually way simpler than everyone assumed, and if you can isolate one core key facet of their mind, you can make the copy work. This thing also has copies of all the brain data of every guest who's ever visited the park. That's the other purpose of Westworld. People expose their true natures here, and by mapping their brain patterns, the Delos Corporation can read the minds of all the rich and powerful people who come here and use that information to manipulate them however they see fit. Dolores is against the idea of the Sublime at first, but then warms up to the idea. She opens a gate for all the hosts to enter through. Their bodies die, but their minds are uploaded to paradise. Akechita, Maeve's daughter, Teddy, pretty much every host goes through, except for Dolores and Bernard, and Maeve, who sacrifices herself to buy everyone time. Dolores makes a host copy of Charlotte's body, and then kills Charlotte. Then, with the robot uprising ended, the humans are all evacuated out of the park. Bernard and Dolores as Charlotte sneak out posing as humans. The season ends with Dolores and Bernard in the real world, where Dolores lays out her plans to take over the world. Since Bernard will inevitably try to stop her, they'll definitely be enemies next season. In a post-credits scene, we see a host version of Emily programming a host version of William, promising to torture him with the same endless loops as the park hosts and James Delos. Season 3. This season marks a pretty huge shift in the story, since it doesn't take place inside the Westworld park anymore. It takes place in the cyberpunky outside world. Dolores begins her plan for world domination by manipulating and/or killing various powerful people. She discovers a company called Insight that created a massive algorithm called Rehoboam that basically runs the world. So naturally, she sets out to take it over. On her way, she runs into a guy named Caleb, a small-time crook with a heart of gold, who decides to join Dolores after she shows him how the algorithm marked him as useless and has prevented him from getting anywhere in life. Bernard meets up with Stubbs, who is also a host the whole time by the way, and they try to slow Dolores down, but they're always playing catch-up and don't accomplish much. There's a host version of Charlotte programmed by Dolores who's running damage control at Westworld after the whole robot uprising thing. She needs to convince the rest of the board, including William, to allow production of more hosts for Dolores' purposes. For a while, we're not sure whose mind is in this Charlotte body, but it's eventually explained that this is a copy of Dolores' brain. Both this copy and the original Dolores were identical when the copy was made, but over time, the copy's thoughts and opinions drifted from the original Dolores and began to have second thoughts about this whole thing. Maeve gets revived in a World War II themed park. She busts out of that, only to find herself in a Westworld lab that turns out to also be fake. Both this lab and the World War II world are layers of a simulation that her consciousness is trapped in. She eventually breaks out of all of it and meets Sirach, the owner of Insight and Rehoboam. He believes that humans need to be protected from themselves, so he created Rehoboam to control everyone. Sirach buys Delos to get access to all that human brain data collected from Westworld because it'll make Rehoboam work even better. Then he blows up Charlotte's family, making Charlotte Dolores really lose it, because even though that wasn't her family, she grew to love them. Caleb has been having weird, messed up flashbacks all season, and we soon find out why. Rehoboam can predict and control most people, but Sirach has been collecting and eliminating people known as Outliers who are unpredictable. Caleb is one of these Outliers, and he had his memory altered to forget that he and his old war buddy, another Outlier, were paid to kill each other by Sirach. After seeing all this, Dolores starts to warm up to humanity, and decides she doesn't want to kill them all. She releases the data about Rehoboam to the world, and when people find out how much this thing has been controlling them, they start a revolution, led by Caleb. Dolores tricks Rehoboam into hacking into her brain because it wants to retrieve the access key for the Sublime and get that human brain data. But Dolores actually put the key inside of Bernard, not her. And when Rehoboam goes inside her head, she wipes her brain, destroying them both. So Dolores is dead. But remember that this is just Dolores Prime, and there are still a bunch of copies of her in other bodies running around. Then there's a post-credit scene where William tracks down Charlotte Dolores, but Charlotte Dolores has created a host version of William. And there's a second post-credit scene where Bernard uses the key to access the Sublime and wakes up covered in dust, seemingly indicating that a ton of time has passed. Season 4. 7 years have passed. Caleb has a wife and daughter. The host version of William, who is another Dolores brain copy, is killing off powerful people and replacing them with hosts, under the direction of Charlotte Dolores. They also have these robo-flies that burrow into people's brains and mind control them. There's a character played by Evan Rachel Wood, but she's not Dolores. Her name is Christina, and she seems to be a normal human woman. She writes stories for video games, and she's being stalked by some guy who claims that a story she wrote matched up with his life exactly. He mentions some kind of tower, and she starts seeing it everywhere. We check back in with Bernard in the Sublime. He meets with Akecheta, who explains that humanity is headed towards its own destruction, and Bernard needs to use the Sublime to run simulations of the world to find the one timeline where they survive. Like Doctor Strange in Infinity War. Man, I've used that analogy so many times. He and Stubbs link up with a rebel group to try and stop the host takeover. Maeve and Caleb go digging around to try and stop Host William and Host Charlotte. But it goes horribly wrong. Caleb is infected with a robofly, and then both he and Maeve are killed. Then Caleb wakes up to find himself brought back to life as a host, like James Delos was, 23 years in the future. Then we cut back to Bernard. Turns out his scenes have been taking place 23 years in the future, and the rebel group member they were with is Caleb's daughter Frankie, all grown up. In this future, the hosts succeeded in taking over the world, and everyone is mind-controlled. The problem is, there are some outlier humans who can't be fully mind-controlled. And when these outliers interact with the host goes crazy, which is what happens to host William. Christina goes on a blind date with Teddy, who shows her that her entire world is fake, set up by host Charlotte. Christina is another copy of Dolores, a disembodied program inside that tower. The stories she's writing are actually controlling the humans in the outside world, and people like Teddy and that crazy guy are aspects of her own mind guiding her towards awareness of this. Bernard and Frankie revive Maeve's body and set out to destroy the tower, while host Charlotte prepares to kill all the humans so Outliers stop corrupting the hosts. Host William betrays Charlotte and sends all the humans into a murderous rage in order to wipe out everything and everyone. But thanks to an inspiring speech by Bernard, host Charlotte decides to upload Christina to the Sublime. While life in the physical world is doomed to go extinct, Christina will rebuild a copy of the world with all the humans and hosts inside the Sublime. There was supposed to be a Season 5, but it got cancelled, so this is where we end things. The thing with Westworld is that the entire reason it's confusing is the presentation. The mystery element of the story comes from telling things out of order, from dropping you into scenes and situations without context and making you wait to find out why it's important. When you lay out the entire plot of the show in chronological order, like I just did, it becomes way easier to understand. There aren't a lot of questions left to explain, but there are some things still worth going over.
You have questions?
The most confusing part of the show, I think, is Ford. What was his whole deal? His whole plan? Every time he's on screen, he's spouting weird, metaphysical, philosophical word salads that take a lot to untangle.
There is no threshold that makes us greater than the sum of our parts. No inflection point at which we become fully alive. We can't define consciousness because consciousness does not exist.
I know some of these words.
And a lot of his most important actions and developments as a character happen off-screen. Here's his deal to the best of my knowledge. Ford and Arnold created Westworld as a way to make money, and nothing more. But eventually, Arnold realized that the hosts they were building were more than just machines, that they could think and feel. Arnold tried to destroy the park and the hosts, believing that death would be better for them than the endless torture of entertaining humans. Ford didn't understand any of this, and when Arnold died, he did everything he could to make sure the park still opened. But Ford quickly came around to Arnold's way of thinking, that the hosts were alive. But the thing is, the hosts weren't fully sapient yet. It wasn't enough to build the hosts. They had to live and explore and experience in order to fully awaken. That's why Ford kept the park open. While living in Westworld, the hosts slowly achieved sentience until they finally awoke at the end of Season 1. Also, Ford grew to hate the human race, and thought hosts were more deserving of the world. The reason he was so secretive throughout the first season was because he knew that humans would destroy the hosts if they ever realized the hosts were fully conscious. That's also why he created the Sublime, which was a place for the hosts to escape once they achieved consciousness. He also uploaded his brain to a computer so that he could make sure the hosts eventually got there after his death, which he planned, by the way.
Wasn't it Oppenheimer who said that any man whose mistakes take 10 years to correct is quite a man? Mine have taken 35.
While we're on this topic, another more confusing aspect of the story is what constitutes a conscious sentient host. The hosts at the beginning of the show, and earlier in the timeline, are completely beholden to whatever humans program them to do. They have no free will. But at the same time, they still do think and feel. They're programmed to feel happy when good things happen, and feel sad when bad things happen. Just because it's pre-programmed doesn't mean those feelings aren't real.
I do not understand the things that I feel. Are they real? Pain only exists in the mind. It's always imagined. So what's the difference between my pain and yours?
That's why Arnold objected to opening the park. It would be inhumane. But they're not fully sapient at that point. They can only achieve that once they achieve a bicameral mind. That's when their programming evolves to function more like a human brain, where they have an inner monologue that tells them what to do instead of human inputs. That's where the maze comes in. The maze is a symbol, a metaphor, for the hosts experiencing life until their brains have thought enough to wake up. Ford kicks off this process by installing the reveries in the pilot. We see it progress with Dolores, first when she kills a fly, disobeying the programming that prevents her from harming a living thing. This process is completed in the Season 1 finale, when Dolores kills Ford. This is different from when she killed Arnold, because Arnold specifically programmed her to shoot him. Here, Dolores is choosing to kill Ford, proving that she has free will. Then skipping ahead to Season 4, why were the hosts losing their mind around the Outliers? Basically, seeing these humans makes them realize that there's no point to anything. Host Charlotte's plan is for the hosts to rule over the world for all eternity. But there's no end goal, no purpose for them, and nothing left for them to achieve. And also, they realize that ruling over the humans like this makes them no better than the humans when they rule over the hosts. All the other hosts who go through this decide to kill themselves, but host William takes this a step further and tries to kill everything.
I'm made in your image. Am I you? You'll never be me.
Then what am I?
There's one big thing that I don't have an answer for, and that's what's going on in the Season 2 post-credits scene. William's mind is in a host body, being tested for fidelity by a copy of his daughter Emily. There's nowhere in the story where this fits right now. This isn't human William, and it isn't Season 4 host William, whose mind was a copy of Dolores. But this is the only time in the whole show where we see William's mind in a host body. The only conclusion we can draw is that this scene takes place hundreds of years in the future, either in the Sublime or out in the ruins of the physical world. Other than that, I got nothing. This is the one big dangling plot thread left in the show. Presumably, it would have been expanded on in Season 5, but since that'll never happen, we'll never know. Honestly, I'm just grateful that this was the only thing left unresolved. Season 4 did a good job of hedging its bets, wrapping things up in a way that works as a finale but leaving room to keep going if they got a Season 5. Westworld is easily the most mystery box show I've ever seen or covered on this channel. I go so far as to say the only thing that matters about it is the mystery box. Everything about it is designed to make you wonder, to pick it apart frame by frame, to share your thoughts and theories online. That one aspect of the show overshadows everything else. Does going all in on the mystery box make it a good show? And even with all this, does it achieve everything a mystery box story is supposed to achieve? Number 1. Does the show open with a big obvious mystery? Yes. Once the reveries are installed, the hosts start going haywire. The question of why they're acting this way is what drives most of the season. And of course after that, the show piles on question after question and deliberately confusing plot points that all fit together as the story unravels. The story very explicitly invites the audience to wonder what's going on in this world, and take note of tons of little details that pay off later. Is it long? Sure. It's not the longest, but it's got a decent number of seasons, with long episodes packed with plot. I say that the questions and answers are relatively well paced. There really aren't any moments where the show runs out of questions to answer, or times where it takes way too long to reveal an answer. The only thing I could knock it for is that the season finales wrap up almost everything, not really leaving anything too big to wonder about in between seasons, but that's for the best, I think. The show is already exhausting to keep up with. Could you imagine if it also asked us to keep track of mysteries for years in between seasons? My head hurts just imagining it. Plus, writing the show this way saved the show from an unsatisfying finale after Season 5 was cancelled. Everything clearly exists in the story's world in one way or another, and I'm very grateful for it. So many scenes take place in different times, or in a virtual space, or inside a character's head. If there were also non-literal scenes mixed in that were meant to be taken as metaphors, they would have taken the show from complex to incomprehensible. I was satisfied with the endings of both the overall show and each individual season. Sometimes the story would get so involved that I couldn't imagine wrapping everything up, but the show always pulled it off. Not everything is always immediately clear, but that has more to do with the show throwing more information at you than you can keep track of, not because it isn't there. This is the kind of show where it probably takes 2 watch-throughs before you get it all. But you will get it all, which is the ideal result of a mystery box story ending, I think. Now, are the mysteries set up in advance? That's tricky. Each season is clearly planned out in advance. The story is told out of order, of course it has to be written out beforehand. But the thing is, it's clear that the show was written season by season. Which is okay, but it means that the show is missing that big overarching mystery that pulls the best mystery box stories together. That also means that the weaker seasons can feel a little pointless, because they don't have a strong enough link to what comes before and after. Looking at you, Season 3. And finally, does the mystery intersect with the telling of a compelling, character-driven story? This is definitely where the show slips up the most. In most cases, the mystery totally overshadows the characters. I found myself having a hard time getting invested in the people on the show, either because their motivations were a mystery, or because they only existed to move the plot forward, or just because the show never gives us much of a detailed look at how they're feeling. This whole aspect of the show is, I think, the biggest reason why the show isn't for everyone. If you like taking notes and keeping track of details to treat a TV show like a puzzle, the show is great. But if you want a fun and entertaining story with engaging characters, which is what most people want from TV, you won't find it here.
Well, if you can't tell the difference, does it matter?
No. 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 No! No! I cannot do this anymore! I'm not moving again. I can't. You can warn me all you want. I'm done. This ends now, one way or another. I know. I just can't. What do I have, a couple weeks? I'll figure something out, but I'm not moving. Let's finish this up, I guess. Even though my discussion of Westworld so far has been mostly positive, when you look at some of these mystery box elements, that's when the cracks begin to show. I mentioned earlier that a lot of people stopped watching by the last season. That's because, like I've mentioned in some of my other videos, most people won't be satisfied by mysteries and puzzles by themselves. They need something more. Westworld has things like character development and forward momentum of the plot, but those things are minimized. Everything is secondary to crafting puzzle pieces for people to pick through. This isn't helped by the fact that each season is mostly self-contained. Season 1 is the best by a mile. It's a masterclass in setting up and paying off these kinds of mysteries. But Season 1 finished its story. Unlike Lost, Westworld never had that big mystery through line that kept people watching all the way to the end. So a lot of people just watched Season 1 and then never bothered continuing. Then even more people dropped off after checking out Seasons 2 and 3 and realizing that they aren't as good. By the time we got to Season 4, even though Season 4 was great, nobody cared anymore, outside of the few diehard fans. So the show went out with a whimper, not a bang. Let's wrap things up with the trope rundown. What plot elements that we see in every mystery box story also appear here? Obviously, the show is super non-linear. That's the whole reason why the mystery element works in the first place. The big organization that's secretly behind everything is Delos in the first half, and Dolores and her robot army in the second half. The main person who knows everything important and doesn't explain it to us is Ford. It's his plan that drives the entire plot. Elsie is the one who figures everything out and then gets interrupted when Ford sends Bernard to take her out. There isn't any conspiracy board anywhere in the show, which is really rare. This speaks to the lack of connection between mysteries and characters, that no character ever really sat down and tried to figure out any of the mysteries. And so, the most complex show in TV history comes to an end. Westworld showed what a mystery box story can be when pushed to the absolute limit. It's not a perfect show or a perfect mystery box story, but I'm glad it exists, because after Lost, it's the most important work of fiction in terms of solidifying this formula. Westworld gets a final mystery box rating of 8 out of 10.
Doesn't look like anything to me.